Hello. Before we begin, I want to be completely transparent. I am not a neutral interviewer. I fully support Ukraine's fight for freedom and sovereignty. This conversation comes from a place of solidarity with the Ukrainian people and deep respect for those, both Ukrainian and foreign, who've taken up arms to defend it. This is not an attempt at false balance. This is a platform to share the story of someone who chose to stand on the right side of history. Today we're speaking with Watchman, a foreign volunteer who traveled to Ukraine in March of 2022, shortly after the Russians' full-scale invasion began. He served with the Norman Brigade, later with the Ukrainian National Guard, and finally with the 49th Battalion, also known as Karpatska Sich, where he took part in the partial Kharkiv counteroffensive, including heavy fighting near Izium. After 6 months on the front line, he was wounded and medically evacuated in September. He's here to reflect on his experience, the battles, the brotherhood, and the personal cost of war. Let's start at the beginning. Before the bullets in the battlefield, who was the fighter before the war, and what compelled him to step into it?
So I was born in Massachusetts. I joined the Army when I was 18 years old. I wanted to serve in the infantry, to serve my country. That was my main motivation for going in, just patriotism. And I wanted to serve in the infantry because I wanted to be a warfighter. I figured that's what the Army does. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to be the warfighter. I didn't want to be a pogue or something. I served in the Army for 3 years, and I went to Korea for 9 months deployment. When I was there, I was actually in a different brigade first. When I went to 1st Cavalry Division, I was in 3rd Brigade first, and then I actually volunteered for the deployment to go to Korea, because they were saying, "Oh, we need people for this deployment." 1st Brigade is shorthanded, so I volunteered for it. And then I got out of the Army after my initial contract, and I was just traveling the country randomly, and I did some volunteer border patrol and some things like that. I protected some businesses during the George Floyd riots because people wanted to burn businesses down for no reason. So I was just doing things like that, just kind of wandering through life, doing random things. And then I saw the invasion of Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine, and then I saw that Zelensky was creating the International Legion, and he made a public statement calling foreigners to come serve in Ukraine. So I took up that opportunity.
What motivated you to answer Zelensky's call?
Well, basically just my background for one. I was in the Army, so I was trained for it. That's what I did for 3 years, and then in 3 years the Army never sent me to war. You join the Army, and you raise your right hand, and you think that I could possibly die, and you get that in your head that I might, especially joining the infantry, I might go to war, I might die. But then 3 years comes, and you just train for 3 years and you never do something. It's like if you went to school for 4 years, to college for 4 years to be an engineer, and then after the 4 years you never end up engineering anything, right? It's kind of like a letdown. So that was one reason, just to actually use my training, and I wanted the war experience. Kind of some people might think that's a weird reason, but that's just what it is. And the second reason is just a genuine reason that I believe in the cause. I believe in the sovereignty of nations. I believe in having more nations in the world is better than having less nations. If just like China and Russia and America and Britain or something, and we just have 4 empires in the world, this isn't very conducive to freedom in the world. The more countries you have, the more options you have in the world. The more, one country can experiment on this, freedom. Look at Singapore, right? Singapore is just this tiny city-state of 10 million people. They split from Malaysia, right? And now look at them, they're the richest country in the world, per capita. They're the richest country in the world. So, you have more experimentations of more countries. That's basically why it's wrong for another country to invade a country. You shouldn't impose your will on other people. And the country Ukraine, They share a lot of values that I believe in. Like, when they did the Maidan Revolution in 2014, it was actually like, grounded in a lot of libertarian principles that I believe in. Like they wanted, Western freedoms. They wanted to cut the corruption of the state. Um, you know, and even like Ukraine, they have a strong Second Amendment movement there. Um, and then like 2014, it was just like the volunteers. It was like the people. There was like no Ukrainian army at all in 2014 because the pro-Russian government before that they just like gutted the army. Like just because if Russia invades like one day, then we won't have an army to defend ourselves. What the Russian government wanted. So it was actually the people of Ukraine that like volunteered. They just like got, like you can get a hunting permit in Ukraine. So they just had rifles from their hunting permits and they just went to the front line to fight against like Russian tanks coming in. So I think that, like not only is it wrong to invade a country just because, right, like to impose your will on other people, but it's especially wrong to invade that country because of the ideals that those people believe in. It's not just like one communist country invading another communist country. No, it's one communist country trying to invade, a country that wants freedom. Like the people genuinely there want freedom. So that's why it's very wrong. I want to stand for a country like, of course, like they didn't get all the changes they wanted from the 2014 revolution, the revolution of dignity. But that was because for one, they were fighting a war, and two, like a lot of times corruption is just very deeply embedded. Even if you try to get rid of it at the highest level, the lower levels, it's still gonna stay. I guess a third reason that I went it could possibly just be like it's in my blood. As weird as that sounds, but I am from Polish blood, and so I can imagine that my Polish ancestors were resisting Russian tyranny at one point. So it could just be in my blood.
That's the third reason is kind of funny, Watchman. But the first reason, talking about you wanted to experience war, I think probably a lot of foreigners go there for that reason. I don't think anyone's showing up to the war thinking, I don't want to experience the war. But, do you know that?
Anyone who says that they want that, they're just lying. Because that's like, if you say that, the average person looks at you like you're some sort of sociopath, like, oh, you just want to kill people. So some people lie about it and they say, oh, no, that's not my reason. But, that's just what it is. And men for thousands of years have wanted to go to war. It's just what it is.
How did your family or friends react to your decision to join in March?
Well, I remember my girlfriend at the time, she's my wife now, but when I told her, he said basically, don't go. And then she said, oh, like I said, oh, I'm going to go. And then she said, oh, no, don't go. What will I do if you die? And then I just told her, no, my decision's made. I'm going to go. And then she just accepted it. She's like, oh, okay. And I guess my mom had a similar reaction, like, don't go. Like, why do you want to go? But, I just told her, like, that's my decision. That's what I'm going to do. And then she just accepted it, because I already have done things like that in the past. So she just kind of accepted that that's how I am. But, at first she tried to tell me not to go. Like, why would you want to do that? But then she actually ended up paying for my plane ticket to Poland. I was fully expecting me to just pay it myself. But then she paid it for me. So that actually helped me out because I had more disposable funds when I was over there. I remember that my mom, she told a family friend, like whose son, like her friend, her son was in Iraq, a combat veteran from Iraq, and he was supposed to come talk to me, probably trying to tell me not to go or something. But I guess what ended up happening is one of his friends from Iraq ended up committing suicide. So then he got like depressed. So he never came to talk to me. I doubt he would have changed my mind, but that was supposed to happen.
That is an interesting turn of events there. Don't really know what to say to that, but so when you got to Poland and you crossed the border into Ukraine, what happens there? Like, how do you go from crossing the border into the Norman Brigade of the Ukrainian Volunteer Army?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a story for me. it wasn't so straightforward. It could have been, but pretty much what happened is that I was in a Discord channel for like Volunteers for Ukraine Discord channel. It's also a subreddit. And there I met some other guys, like 3 other guys who wanted to go to Ukraine. So we just planned to meet at the airport in Krakow, Poland. And so me and another American, we arrived like early, like I forget what time it was. Like I don't know if it wasn't early in the day, maybe in the afternoon, but we arrived there. But then like we arrived around the same time, I think. But then I think I arrived first, and then I waited like a half hour, an hour for him. But then there was 2 other Irish people who were with it coming to meet us, and they weren't getting in until like late at night. So we basically were just like sleeping in the airport, like taking a nap or something, and we're just waiting for them there like for hours. I remember like this was like my first experience to the war, because at the airport, you saw like the Ukrainian refugees there, like the women and children at the airports, and like you could tell they were Ukrainian because like they had all their bags, like they were moving their whole life, right? So you could tell they were refugees. And but yeah, so then we waited for them, and then I think so once they got there, I guess we got a hotel. Like the group decided to get a hotel for the night. And then we got the hotel in Krakow, and after that we woke up in the morning, and then we tried to go to the embassy in Krakow to try to like see about joining the army, like just at the embassy there. We applied, so me and the other American applied to the embassy, like in the American embassy, but they never replied to us. And then the Irish guys, they applied also, and then the embassy, their embassy in Ireland did reply to them, and they just gave them like some contact, like, oh, this guy can like give you a ride to the border or something like that, and then he'll bring you to the Legion. But so what ended up happening is like we were getting paranoid, and like when we were at the airport, there was like these other foreigners who were coming up to us, and they were telling us like that don't join the Legion, it's suicide. And then they were saying like, oh, don't go with this guy, because this guy like is a Russian agent or something, or he'll just bring you to this unit and then you'll get killed or something. I forget the whole story. And then there was like this guy who was drunk, like a different guy who was drunk, and he was coming here and he said, oh, I got rejected at the border, they didn't even let me in the country. So there was just all these rumors going around, and we don't know like who's telling the truth and what, or who's a Russian agent, and anything. We don't know anything. We just showed up, right? Like we don't know anything. And then here we are, like other guys who are seemingly like us, right? Like, oh, another foreigner who wants to do the same thing as me, and he's telling me all these bad things. So then like the contact that the Irish people had from their embassy, that was like the same guy, like the same name as the guy who came up to us at the airport and said, oh, don't go with this guy because he's the bad guy, and he'll just bring you to this unit, and you'll just go to be cannon fodder or something. So basically we didn't trust to go with him, so we went to the embassy ourselves. And then once we got to the embassy in Krakow, it was just like a line out the door, like onto the street, of just all Ukrainian refugees, like women and children, just out at the embassy. So it's a consulate, right? So we just were like, oh, well, we're not going to wait all day in the line. So we just decided to get a taxi, and we split the taxi 4 ways, and we went from Krakow to the border. And once we got to the border, so we had to get out on foot from the taxi on the border. And then so we got out in the taxi, and I remember like we asked the border guards, they were like wearing like military like fatigues or something, but we just asked the border guard, like the Polish border guards, like, oh, how do we cross the border? They just pointed us over there. And then that was like one of the first times like the war really set in, because at the airport you saw some of the refugees, and at the embassy we saw them. But when we were at the border, like the border where you walk across it at the foot crossing, it was like all just like a line of women and children in their suitcases and stuff, just going into Poland, like a huge line of people. And we were just like, and like they were waiting for the bus. That's why the line was kind of like, like stopping. But it was like a huge line of people, so we were just looking at them, and they're like, because their face is just like terrible, right? Because they don't know what they're gonna do next. Like they're just gonna go to a new country they've never been to, so they're you can see it in their face. And and then like we were crossing the border, and the only other people who are crossing the border are just other men to go fight, or like whoever, right? So they're like aid workers, humanitarian aid workers. There's no women and children crossing to go back. So that's when it really sets in, like, oh well, all these people are trying to flee the country, and we're the only idiots who are trying to enter. So that was like second guessing yourself a little bit, like, oh, is this what I want to do? All these people are leaving. Is it a good idea? And then once we got across the border, I remember like we were reading on Reddit, like on Reddit people were saying, oh, just tell the border guards you want to join the military and they'll do something. But when we crossed, just like we went up to the border guard, just the lady who stamps your passport, and then we were like, I want to join the army. She just looked at us and then looked back at our passport and stamps it and just gives us our passport. And she probably didn't speak English, right? And then we're just like, what do we do? Like, she just gives us back our passport and says bye. Like, what do we do? So we just like walk further, and then there's like this guy at a little like set up tent, and like one of those canopy tents or whatever, and he's wearing like a blue reflective vest. Like I guess he was a police officer or something like that. But it was just like, you want to know he's a police officer. It's just like a blue reflective vest, like for construction or something. I don't know what that guy was. And he was just telling us like, oh, you want to join the Legion? And we're like, yeah. And so he just like gives us a ride. And I was like kind of second guessing, like, oh, I don't want to take a ride from anyone once they're a Russian spy. So we just like, so we took the ride from them, I guess, and then, but it wasn't even a far walk. It's like 1 kilometer away or something. And they bring us to like this school, and the school was being used, like it wasn't an active school. It was just being used to like mostly just to like if the Ukrainian refugees, like the women and children, they were going to cross the border. So they traveled all day across country, and then now they're at the border, so they're going to like sleep there for the night. And then in the morning, they'll do the border crossing. So that's what the school was set up for. So there's a bunch of refugees in there also. And they put us on the top floor of there. Like all the Legion fighters or all the foreigners are going to join the Legion. They put us on the top floor of that school, and they fed us and they gave us food and everything, and it was pretty great. Like they gave us like mattresses, to, like little foam, camping mattresses to sleep on, like in case we didn't bring our own. So they took care of us good. Like, and then in the morning, we were supposed to go and like take the bus to the Legion base, and that's where we'll actually join. So, but what ended up happening is that there is this guy who is there, and he's telling everybody all this stuff like, oh, I'm a French Foreign Legion colonel, and I have connections to this militia commander, like this volunteer battalion, this militia commander who he's here in Lviv. So, hey guys, like instead of going to the Legion, and you're just going to be used as cannon fodder in the trenches of Kiev, right? And you're just all going to die. Instead, come with me, and we'll just be our own unit. We'll separate by ourselves. This militia guy, this militia officer, he'll give us the weapons. And so we'll kind of work under him, but we'll also kind of, be our own thing and have our own leadership and do our own thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to protect the refugee humanitarian corridor from Kyiv to Lviv to the border, right? And because, we don't know what's going to happen, like the Belarusians, they might come down from the north, and this could have been true because nobody knows what was going to happen in the first weeks of the war. Because this was in March, right? And Russia invaded in like February 27th or something. So this was like March 10th, March 11th. And so this was still the first weeks of the war. And so there was like, oh, the Belarusians, they can come down from the north, and they can cut off the humanitarian corridor for all those refugees trying to get across. So we're just going to guard that. And so if the Belarusians invade, we'll fight them. And so it was basically everybody at the school. It was like a group like mentality sort of thing. Everybody was like, "Well, if everybody's doing it, I'm going to do it." So that everybody did it, right? And so everybody just followed this random guy who said he was a French Foreign Legion colonel. And then like he hijacked the whole thing, right? Like, so then he tells us, "Okay, so we're going to get on the bus, and you know, we're not going to go to the Legion base. We're going to go meet the militia commander, and we're going to go to the armory there, and we're going to get all our weapons. Just day one." And that's how it's going to work. But he's just making all this up, right? And I don't know this at the time. I figured this out later that he's making all this up. But the Ukrainian officer, the military officer who's in charge of like the school area to bring the foreigners to the Legion base, he doesn't know any of that, right? He thinks that they're going to get on the bus and they're going to go to the Legion, they're going to sign a contract, then we're going to bring them somewhere, right, to fight. But the guy, this guy, he speaks in like an Australian accent or something, like half Australian, half British. I don't know. This is a weird guy, right? And so they said, "Oh, we're gonna go get our weapons at the armory from this militia commander." And then we get on the bus, and he's telling us all this stuff, like, "Oh yeah, we're blah 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 blah." Like he's telling us all this stuff along the bus ride, and then we get off the bus, we look around, and we're like, "We're at the Legion base." You can see like all these foreigners in formation, right? Like, we're at the Legion base. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, we're at the Legion base." But the problem is that the driver and the Ukrainian commander, he lied to me, and he just brought us there, and he told us we were going to the armory, but now we're here. And then he said, "Oh yeah, but we're just gonna get our weapons here at the Legion base, right?" So the militia commander, that guy doesn't exist anymore. We're just gonna get our weapons at the Legion base. And then we get off the bus, and then this guy, like, he goes into this room with this Ukrainian commander, and he goes inside the building, and we're just all waiting out there, wondering what's going to happen next, just talking to each other. And then he comes back and he says, "Oh, well, okay, we're not going to do it. I'm just going to get back on the bus. You guys are free to make up your own mind, but if you go with them, then they're going to just send you to the trenches of Kiev, and you're going to all die. And so just don't, but I'm getting on the bus, and he won't let me join anyways because I'm above 60. Like, I think he said that. So it's like, okay, you guys make your own choice." So then everybody just gets on, right? Like, because my mindset was, well, I don't know if this guy is telling the truth or not. So if he's telling the truth, then I missed the opportunity. And if he's lying, I can just come back here and join later, right? So that was my mindset. And then everybody gets on the bus, like the whole bus that's trying to join the Legion, like they all just leave. Like we're like, okay, we're all gonna leave. So a whole busload of potential recruits leave because of this guy. And then he says, "Okay, so now we're going to go to the town, and we're going to speak to the police. We're going to go to the police station, and we're going to speak to them, and they're going to give us some mission, and like our original mission of protecting the humanitarian corridor." So then we get off this bus, and we're in this like random little town or something. And then he goes and speaks to, I don't know who he speaks to, but he says he's going to go speak to the police. And then he comes back and he says, "Oh no, we can't do that. We can only do a training. So we can just like do a training of the like Ukrainian soldiers, and they only want people with like combat experience or like military experience, because a bunch of the guys, they were just like random civilians from Britain mostly, and they didn't have any experience. So like, more than half of the people didn't have any military experience. So then we just picked like 10 of us who had military experience. And then we said, okay, so this is our new group. Everybody else, like, get lost or something, like figure out what you're going to do. So I think like 3 or 4 people maybe ended up going back to the Legion. And then most of the people that were there ended up leaving Ukraine and going back home. Like, all the 3 guys that I met with the airport, all those 3 guys ended up going home, and like, oh yeah, everybody just basically split, and it was just like 10 of us left or something. But the American I was with, he was like a combat veteran from Afghanistan, I think, and he was like also a sergeant, like an E5 in the army, and he was supposed to be with us, and then he was supposed to go with us to do the training, but he was only there because he was like having problems with his wife. And so he basically told me like, "Oh, I just came just to make my wife mad." So then, like, he must have had a conversation with his wife or something to make up for the fighting. And then there was these other two British people. So I think one of the British guys was a veteran from the British Army, and then the other British guy was active duty British Army. So they were freaking out like that. Oh, I'm AWOL. Like they're gonna find out eventually. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have went AWOL to fight in Ukraine. So those two British guys and then the American, they just split from us in the middle of the night. Like we're thinking like, okay, we're gonna go to sleep and we're gonna wake up and then we're gonna do this thing where we're gonna talk to the police and do the training thing, right? Okay, so they didn't tell us anything, and they just literally deserted us in the middle of the night. Like they didn't say, "Hey guys, this isn't for me. I'm gonna go home." Blah blah. No, they just left in the middle of the night while we're sleeping. Didn't say a word. So, I guess it's better they don't fight, right? And I mean, you can't trust them. And then after that, like we wake up after they left, and then we're at that same school. So they actually brought us back to the school, right? This is how nice the Ukrainians were, right? Like we wasted all their time, and we went to the Legion base, and then we said, "Oh, actually, I changed my mind. I'm not going to join." So then they put us up again for another night and fed us for another night and breakfast, right? And fed us, and then even though we're not going to join, and we wasted all their time and their gas, right? And they still put us up for another night. That's just how nice the Ukrainians were. And then we were waiting outside the school at the bus stop, and then the guy said, "Oh, we're gonna go to the Lviv, and we're gonna do our training to start training the Ukrainian soldiers and police or whatever." And then he gets a call, and then he says in the call like, "Oh, like it's not gonna happen. Like this guy, he's out of town or something. My contact's away, so we can't do it." And then, so he says, "Oh, I'm just gonna go back to Poland because I don't want to stay here. There's no hotel. There's no hotel rooms in Lviv because there's a bunch of refugees. So we'll never find a hotel in Lviv. So let's go back to Poland." And at this time, there's like maybe 5 of us left or something. And so then I was just kind of at this point, I was like, "Oh, this is stupid." But I was like following the group. I was like, "Oh, whatever. I'll just do it." And so we go back to Poland, and then once we crossed back the border into Poland on that same foot crossing, and then once we get there, it's like the whole humanitarian camp, like the Red Cross or whatever, and the World Central Soup Kitchen, and all those people setting up for the refugees. And so we go there, and I'm just sitting there, and so okay, so I forgot something. So that night that we're at the school is when you can look this up on the news. Like there's news articles about this. There was an attack on the Legion base, right? So and we heard the explosions actually that night. Like when people were standing outside. I don't smoke, but other people were standing outside and smoking, and I was with them just talking. And we heard the explosions from the base, and we didn't really know what it was at the time, like because it's just a random explosion, right? How do you know where it is? But after that, we looked it up on the news, and the news was reporting that the Legion base got hit. So even though this guy was a liar and he was a scammer, he might have saved my life because I ended up not being in the base at that time, and I could have got blown up on the base because like over 70 foreigners died, I think, from that missile attack.
I think it was 80 something.
So yeah, that was a blessing from God in disguise. And yeah, so then anyways, we went back to the it was like a whole makeshift camp set up for the refugees. So what ended up happening is I spoke to some foreigners. Like there was one foreigner who was there. He said he was a former Dallas cop. I don't know if that's true, but he said he was at the Legion base when they got blown up, and then he came across after us. And then he said, "Oh no, that's I'm not doing that. They just set us up in these camps all together, and then we all got blown up because we were so close. And then we were just hiding out in the woods after that." So he said, "Oh no." And
Hello?
like, "Oh, we're gonna do it tomorrow," and then it never came. "Oh, just wait. Like I have to wait for the call for this guy." Then that never came. But what we ended up doing was we stayed at the refugee camp for about 2 weeks, and I mean it wasn't that bad because we had a place to stay and we were getting fed for free, and like I didn't really come with that much money because I thought I'm just gonna join the army, I came with enough money, but not like money to just live forever. So, so we basically ended up staying at that refugee camp for like 2 weeks, and we were just like staying in one of the buildings there, and we were helping out, like carry things or do whatever needs to be done for the food that they're giving out to the refugees. So we were just helping out there, and we are just trying to like meet other foreigners as they were crossing, that sort of thing. Um, and then eventually, like this guy, he said he was going to go to the embassy. And like the whole time he was just like feeding. So he said I'm going to go to the Ukrainian embassy to talk to them about, and I'm going to get our militia papers so we can operate by ourselves and blah, 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 all these lies. And eventually he just said, oh, you just crossed the border by yourself and I'll follow you later. And at that point, like all of us knew he was like just, full of shit. And we kind of just understood at that point, well, we just crossed the border anyways because we wanted to cross ourselves. And then this like new guy who was like saying he was like this other British guy, he was saying he was like an SAS and something. I don't know if it was true, but that Australian French-born Legion Colonel scammer guy put him in charge. And then that guy said, oh, we're gonna go to Kyiv and we're gonna do this, training. We're gonna train these guys or something. And then at that time, I was just like following them, like just like because we're traveling together, and like I don't know where the train station is. And then we went together to Kyiv, but then I was already talking to the Norman Brigade at that time. I just messaged them online, like I think through WhatsApp or something. I got their contact somehow, and they told me like send your D214 or something, and I sent it. And they had just was scheduled to arrive to them. So at this time, Kyiv was still under siege. So we got off the train in Kyiv, and like some of the windows of the train station were like blown out and stuff, and there was like tape on some of the windows and stuff like that. And it was like a ghost town there, almost like no cars except around the train station immediately. Everything was closed. There was just a bunch of refugees in the train station waiting for their train out of Kyiv. You could like hear the fighting, like you could hear the shelling outside the city, like from a distance away. It wasn't like a close explosion, but it was like, you could hear like the far away sounds of the war. And it was like, there was just like, hundreds or something of just police officers, just like, police officers with like full kit and like rifles, just like sitting outside the train station and inside the train station. And then I remember like eventually I asked one of them, like, how do you get food? There was like no food in the train station. There was just like coffee and like maybe some like bread snacks, but there was no like meals you could buy in the food. So I asked one of them, like, how do you eat? And he was like, oh, like, and it was like, you come to fight? I was like, yeah, we're here to be soldiers, but we need food right now. And he's like, oh yeah, come with me. So he brings us like down we leave the train station, and then this guy didn't speak good English, by the way, so we're just like barely communicating through like Google Translate and hand gestures or whatever. But so he's like, okay, come with me, and then we go outside the train station. We walk like, I remember, to the left or something, and then we walk like a block or two away to this random building. We go up the stairs, and then on the second floor there's like a cafeteria, and it's just like only soldiers and police eating there. And then maybe this guy spoke a little bit in English, but then I was asking him like, well, how do people eat here? He's telling us like everything's closed because of the war, like the shops aren't allowed to operate, everything's closed. And then I was like, so how do people eat here? He's like, well, I don't know, they don't. I was like, what if they're a child? He's like, oh, well, if they're a child, we'll give them food for free, but the adults, they're on their own. And it's like, oh, okay, that's pretty crazy. So we went up to the second floor cafeteria, and they fed us. Like, we didn't have to pay. It was free. And it was just only soldiers eating there. And that's why I was wondering, like, it's only soldiers here, so how does anybody else eat? And, I think most people, like, only half the city left, right? Because I think only 2 million people left out of a city of 4 million. So there's still 2 million people in the city during the war. Like, when there was a close battles going on in Kyiv. So yeah, after that, we just got on our next train to go to Dnipro, and we met our contact in Dnipro. He picked us up at the train station in Dnipro, and then he brought us to this base of the Ukrainian Volunteer Army. So the Norman Brigade was attached to the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, think we ended up joining a 3rd battalion. It was, and we just we stayed, I think, one night in this base, with all the Ukrainian soldiers. And then in the morning we went to the front, but it wasn't he told us it was the front, so we're like, oh, we're going to the front, but it was 20 kilometers from the front, and we went to this town that was closer to the front, and we went to the base there. But then when we got there, the other foreigners were actually at the front, and then we just got to the base that was 20 kilometers from the front. So then we had to wait for a week or something for them to come back. And that's it. That's how I joined Northern Brigade.
All right. After watching part 1 of my interview with Watchman, there is 6 parts in this series. This part covered his motivations, to how he got to Poland, to crossing the border into Ukraine, and how he ended up in the Northern Brigade. Stick around for part 2 to hear the rest of his story. Thank you for watching.